Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, be sure to drop your thoughts, feelings, and lessons in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Let's get into it. The cruelest thing my wife ever did was take my wedding ring off my finger like she was removing something dirty, drop it into my palm, and say, "Pay up." She did it in our living room outside Charlotte, with her mother watching like an approved witness and her sister filming like my pain was content. Here's how it happened. My name is Darius Coleman, a black man in my mid-30s, raised in Prince George's County, Maryland, the kind of place that teaches you early how quickly the world can misunderstand you. I learned to keep my voice level, my posture calm, my anger locked down, because I've watched men who look like me get judged for emotions other people are allowed to have. I thought that discipline was maturity. I thought it would protect my marriage. I didn't realize it could also make me an easier target. I met Imani Brooks at a cookout in Silver Spring when I was still building my career in construction management, and she was finishing school. She was the kind of beautiful that made people listen before she even spoke, and the kind of smart that made you believe she could bend the world into whatever shape she wanted. She asked me questions like she cared about my thoughts, and she laughed like she appreciated the steadiness in me. I had worked hard for steadiness. I mistook her intensity for devotion. Imani's family was close in a way that looked warm from a distance and felt like surveillance up close. Her mother, Patrice Brooks, had a polite smile that never softened. Her sister, Tasha Brooks, lived for attention and treated every gathering like a stage. Her cousin, Sean Brooks, was the type to talk about moves and leverage, like life was a negotiation and relationships were contracts. They didn't dislike me at first, but they didn't welcome me either. It was more like they were assessing whether I was useful. When I proposed, Patrice brought up a prenup like she was suggesting a restaurant. "It's standard," she said, voice calm, eyes sharp. Imani nodded like it was already decided. "It keeps everything clean," she said. No confusion later. I tried to tell myself it wasn't personal. People protect assets. People plan. But there was something about the way they said later that made it feel like the marriage was already being discussed like a temporary arrangement. I didn't sign anything blindly. I hired my own attorney, Renee Whitaker, a black woman in D.C. with a reputation for being thorough and unimpressed by intimidation. Renee read the draft and said, "This document is written like you're an employee she might fire." She wasn't dramatic. She was factual. She pointed out clauses that assumed I would be the one who did harm, the one who might mismanage, the one who might retaliate. I felt insulted, then embarrassed for feeling insulted, then angry that the paperwork made room for everyone's fear except my own. Renee negotiated changes. Imani acted offended that I wanted protections too. "Are you planning to leave me?" she asked, like my caution was betrayal. I said no. "I'm planning to be responsible." Patrice smiled and said, "Responsible men don't fear paperwork." Renee didn't argue. She just kept editing. The final prenup protected premarital property for both of us, outlined how certain debts would be handled, and included a section about money moved in contemplation of divorce. It felt like boring legal language at the time, something you file away and never think about again. We married in Washington, D.C., surrounded by black family dressed in their best, a beautiful ceremony with music that made people cry. I believed in the moment. I believed in the vow. I believed Imani believed too. If I'm honest, a part of me also believed that once you married someone, they stopped treating you like a candidate and started treating you like family. I didn't know some people treat marriage like ownership. We moved to North Carolina when I got a strong offer near Charlotte. We bought a townhouse in a clean neighborhood where the sidewalks looked new and the grass always looked trimmed. Imani enrolled in graduate school. I paid most of the bills, not with resentment, but with pride. I grew up watching men provide as a form of love. I thought I was doing it right. Imani called me solid when she was in a good mood. When she wasn't, she called me basic. The change didn't happen overnight. It came in small cuts that didn't bleed at first. Imani started correcting me in front of people, how I told stories, how I described my work, how I phrased things. If I said I was tired, she said, "You're always tired," like my fatigue was a character flaw. If I came home quiet, she said, "You never bring energy," like my calmness was a debt. If I tried to plan a date night, she said, "That's cute, the way you talk to a child." I started feeling like I was auditioning in my own home. Patrice's involvement expanded as soon as Amani felt comfortable. Patrice called about our spending, our mortgage, our goals. She framed it as guidance, but it felt like instruction. Tasha visited and recorded everything: decor, food, outfits, always angling the camera so I looked like the background. Sean made jokes about keeping a woman satisfied and not getting left behind. They laughed like it was harmless. I laughed too, because I didn't want conflict. Later, in bed, I would stare at the ceiling and wonder why I felt lonely next to a woman who claimed she loved me. Imani started treating money like a scoreboard. If I suggested we save, she rolled her eyes and said, "You think small." If I didn't immediately agree to a purchase, she said, "You're controlling." The word controlling became her favorite weapon because it doesn't require proof, it just requires suspicion. In the world we live in, suspicion can be enough to damage you. I started paying attention to how quickly she used that word around her family, like she was planting it. I first noticed something real when the bank notifications didn't match our routine. A transfer here, a new subscription there, a credit line I didn't recognize. When I asked, Imani didn't explain. She dismissed it. "I handled it," she said, eyes on her phone. Don't stress about things you don't understand. That sentence stayed with me, not because I needed to feel smarter than her, but because she wanted me to feel smaller. And when a person wants you smaller, it's because they're planning to step over you. The first night I slept in my car wasn't because I was locked out. It was because I couldn't breathe in the bedroom after another argument about money. She didn't yell. She never had to. She used that cold voice, the one that made your stomach feel hollow. "You're not my father," she said. "You don't get to question me." I sat in my car under a streetlight and realized I was afraid of going inside my own home. Not afraid of violence, but afraid of humiliation, of being reduced to nothing with words that landed like punches. We tried couple therapy once, and it taught me more than it fixed. Imani performed. She spoke with calm vocabulary, described herself as unsupported, overburdened, emotionally starved. When I tried to explain my side, she looked at me like I was proving her point just by speaking. After the session, she said, "Don't embarrass me again." It was the first time I understood she didn't want resolution. She wanted an audience that would confirm her narrative. Around that time, I noticed a new glow in Imani that had nothing to do with our marriage. She started dressing differently, more polished, more expensive. She began attending networking events and charity mixers for school. She guarded her phone. She took calls in the car. She stayed out late and came home smelling like perfume that wasn't hers. When I asked directly if there was someone else, she didn't deny it. She just stared at me like the question bored her. "If there was," she said, "what would you do?" It wasn't a curiosity. It was a test. The answer was, I would do what I've always done, try to keep dignity intact. And she knew that. She knew I wouldn't explode. She knew I wouldn't hit walls or scream or make threats. She knew my restraint could be twisted into weakness. That's what made the cruelty so clean. It wasn't chaos. It was a strategy. I found out about the other man through a small mistake she didn't think mattered. One night, she fell asleep with her phone unlocked. A message popped up from a contact saved as VL. It read, "Tell him I'll be there after he leaves." Another message followed, "I want you in that blue dress again." I didn't scroll for more. I didn't need a whole movie when the trailer already told me the ending. My hands shook anyway, slow and quiet, like my body was trying to process a betrayal my mind wasn't ready to accept. The next morning, she moved through the kitchen like nothing had happened. She poured coffee, asked about my day, and reminded me we had dinner at Patrice's house that weekend. When I said, "Who is VL?" she didn't flinch. She didn't even blink slowly like people do when they're about to lie. "Someone who treats me like I matter," she said, and sipped her coffee like my marriage was a dead thing we were just stepping over. Then she added, "Before you start, I'm not apologizing. I'm choosing myself." That was the day she started using the prenup as a threat out loud. "Remember what you signed," she said, voice low, confident. "Don't make this ugly." I remember standing there thinking, she is speaking to me like a lawyer, not a wife. Like I'm an opponent. Like love is over and we're negotiating the wreckage. The financial bleeding accelerated. Transfers from the joint account into an account I didn't recognize. Charges for furniture. Charges for trips. When I asked, she said, "I'm securing my future." When I said, "With our money," she smiled like I was naive. "Our money is a story you tell yourself," she replied. In reality, I'm not leaving with less than I deserve. The entitlement in her voice was so steady, it made me feel like I was the one misunderstanding. That's how manipulation works. It makes you question your own reality. Patrice called me one evening and said, "Darius, don't do anything foolish. Women today protect themselves. You should be grateful she's handling this like an adult." I realized she wasn't calling to mediate. She was calling to remind me that I was being watched, that everything I did could be framed as a threat. It made my chest tighten. I wanted to tell her, "Your daughter is stealing from our household." But I knew how fast that would become, "Darius is angry and unstable." The ring moment came on a Tuesday morning. I had taken a half day off, planning to talk calmly, thinking maybe the cruelty was a phase, thinking maybe the woman I married was still inside there somewhere. I walked into the living room and saw Patrice on the couch with her legs crossed, posture perfect, eyes cool. Tasha sat nearby with her phone already in her hand. Imani stood in front of me like she was presenting a decision, not starting a conversation. She grabbed my left hand, slid the ring off, dropped it into my palm, and said, "Pay up." I didn't understand at first because my brain couldn't catch up to the disrespect. "What is this?" I asked. Imani looked at me like I was slow. "This is your consequence," she said. Patrice added, "We're doing this properly." I saw a folder on the table like a prepared exhibit. Inside were printed statements, asset lists, and typed demands. It was organized the way people organize something they've already emotionally detached from. My marriage had been turned into a business plan. Tasha's phone lens followed my face, hunting for a reaction. Imani's demands weren't just unfair, they were confident. She wanted half the equity in the townhouse, spousal support, and a lump sum equalization payment. She claimed she had supported my career. The lies sat in the room like smoke. I had paid her tuition. I had worked overtime while she studied. I had carried stability while she collected credentials. But Imani's face stayed calm, like facts were optional. I realized then that she wasn't negotiating based on truth. She was negotiating based on power and what she thought she could force. I didn't sign. I closed the folder and pushed it back. "I'm getting my own attorney," I said. Patrice's smile thinned. "You could try," she replied. Imani crossed her arms. "You think you can outsmart us?" she asked. "You're a job site manager. This is law." That line hit me harder than it should have, because it contained years of her contempt in one sentence. "You are the worker, not the decision maker. You are the tool, not the owner." That night, she locked the bedroom door. Not because she was afraid, because she wanted me displaced. She wanted a story she could tell later, that I was separated, that I was out, that she had control of the home. I slept on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle, feeling like I had become a stranger in a place my paycheck was built. At 2 a.m., I heard her laugh softly on the phone in the bathroom, the kind of warm laugh she hadn't given me in months. Then she said, "He's finally getting it." 2 days later, I was served papers at my job site. Not divorce papers, something sharper. A request for a temporary no-contact order, claiming she felt unsafe and needed exclusive use of the marital residence. The humiliation was surgical. A process server walking up while my crew watched, handing me an envelope like I was a problem that needed public handling. My supervisor pulled me aside and asked, carefully, "Everything all right?" I could feel judgment trying to form before facts arrived. I said, "I have counsel," and kept my voice even while my stomach churned. Imani wanted me desperately. She wanted me to react emotionally so she could frame it as proof. She texted that night, "You're not coming back here. Send the first payment by Friday." When I didn't respond, she sent, "Don't play with me. You signed a prenup." The way she used the prenup like a threat told me she didn't understand it as a mutual agreement. She understood it as a weapon she believed only she could swing. I called my cousin Andre Coleman in Baltimore. Andre listened, then sighed and said, "Man, Maybe just settle. That family seems serious. I felt something go cold in me. Not because he was wrong about them being serious, but because he was telling me to accept being mistreated like it was normal. That's how people get trapped. When the people they trust teach them that suffering is just the price of being a man. I called my friend Malik Grant, who had been blunt with me my whole life. Malik said, "Stop talking to her. Start documenting. Call Renee." Then he added, quieter, "You don't deserve this." That sentence almost broke me because it was so simple and so rare. I had spent months being treated like I deserved disrespect. Hearing the opposite felt like oxygen. When I called Renee Whitaker, I expected questions. She didn't ask many. She told me exactly what to do. Screenshot every transfer, pull every statement, write a timeline, stop arguing, stop reacting. Let her be confident, Renee said. Confident people make measurable mistakes. Renee filed responses immediately to block the no-contact attempt from becoming a permanent label. She also advised me not to do anything dramatic with funds. "We move clean," she said. "We win cleanly." I moved into a cheap motel for a week because I couldn't risk being in the house while the exclusive use issue was pending. The room smelled like old cleaning spray and loneliness. I slept with my keys in my hand like I was trying to hold onto the last thing I controlled. During the day, I went to work and acted normal. At night, I stared at the ceiling and tried to understand how the person who once held my face in her hands could now treat me like a paycheck that refused to cooperate. Imani didn't soften. If anything, she got colder. She sent messages like invoices. "Payment due. Your delay is noted." Patrice left voicemails warning me not to get emotional. Tasha posted vague captions about choosing peace and cutting off toxic men, letting people fill in the blank with my name. Sean texted once, "Don't fight women who know the system." I realized they weren't just trying to take money. They were trying to rewrite who I was. The social isolation hurt almost as much as the betrayal. Mutual friends stopped inviting me out. One coworker asked if I was okay mentally. I heard that Imani had told people I was controlling and unstable. She never claimed I hit her because she didn't need that level of lie. She just needed enough suspicion to make people step back. In our world, a whisper can cost you a job, a contract, a reputation you spent years building. She knew that. She used it without a flicker of shame. Renee helped me separate my direct deposit legally from the joint account and set up transparent, documented payments for required shared expenses. "We show the court you're responsible," she said. "We show you're not hiding." Then she asked for something specific, proof of when Imani started moving money and incurring debt. I pulled statements and built a spreadsheet like I was managing a project. The pattern wasn't random. It escalated in the weeks before the ring moment. More transfers, larger amounts, new debt lines, payments to her attorney. She had been preparing to divorce while still spending from the marital pool. The deeper we looked, the uglier it got. Renee found a lease agreement Imani had signed weeks before she took my ring off, deposit paid with joint funds. She had ordered furniture for that apartment while still sleeping in our bed. She had paid her legal retainer from the joint account while telling the court she needed protection from my control. The betrayal wasn't emotional. It was logistical. She had planned my displacement like a move on a chessboard. The other man became more visible, not to me directly, but through the careless confidence of people who think they're untouchable. Malik saw Imani uptown with an older black man in a suit, luxury watch, posture like he owned the sidewalk. She looked proud, Malik said, like she was finally in the world she wanted. Later, I learned his name, Victor Langston. Money, status, connections. The kind of man some people chase like a trophy because they think it erases every insecurity they've ever had. Imani started comparing me to Victor without saying Victor's name. "Some men move differently," she said one night on the phone when we spoke through attorneys, but still had occasional direct contact about logistics. "Some men don't need to be asked." The contempt in her voice made my throat tighten. I wanted to ask, "So why did you marry me?" But I knew the answer would be cruel and pointless. A person who feels no remorse doesn't use truth. They use whatever hurts most. The temporary hearing about residence and support was my first time seeing Imani in a courtroom. She arrived dressed like she was attending a celebration, not dismantling a marriage. Patrice sat behind her with a face like stone. I sat beside Renee and kept my hands folded. Imani told the judge she felt unsafe, that I monitored spending, that I controlled her. She said she needed the house and needed support. Her tone was calm, almost bored, as if she was describing a customer service issue. Renee didn't attack her. She introduced facts: my payment history, my steady income, the absence of police reports, the absence of evidence. The judge didn't give Imani everything she wanted. He granted a temporary arrangement to reduce conflict and ordered full financial disclosures. Imani looked irritated, just a flash, but enough to show she hated being forced into transparency. Outside the courtroom, Patrice said, loudly, "We're going to finish him." She wanted me to hear it. I heard it. I kept walking because my survival depended on not giving them the reaction they wanted. In the months that followed, I lived like my life was under a microscope. I watched what I said at work. I avoided being alone with Imani. I kept communication written. I saved every message. My sleep was thin. My appetite disappeared. Some mornings I sat in my truck and had to breathe through shaking hands before I stepped out and played the role of steady supervisor. I started to feel like my body was paying for the restraint my mind demanded. Mediation was where Imani tried to crush me quietly. She offered deals that sounded reasonable until you looked closely. She wanted to live in the townhouse while I paid the mortgage and also pay her support. She wanted a lump sum and access to accounts. She spoke like she was granting me mercy by not taking more. Patrice sat nearby, not speaking, but radiating pressure. Tasha wasn't in the room, but I could feel her spirit there, the hunger for my collapse. Imani looked at me once and said, "This could be easy if you weren't stubborn." Renee listened, then asked a single question. Has counsel reviewed the prenuptial clause regarding dissipation of marital assets in contemplation of divorce? Imani's attorney hesitated. Not long, but long enough. Imani's eyes narrowed. What clause? She asked sharp. Renee didn't explain. She didn't threaten. She simply said, "We'll address it in court." I watched Imani's confidence tighten into anger, and I realized something important. She had been using a document she never actually respected. She thought it was a one-way lock. She didn't believe it could lock her out, too. After mediation failed, Imani escalated again. More filings, more accusations, requests for forensic accounting as if I was hiding money, demands for temporary support. She tried to drain me through the process to make legal fees the punishment. It worked emotionally for a while. There were nights I sat at my small apartment table surrounded by paperwork and felt like my chest couldn't expand enough to breathe. I kept thinking, how could someone hurt you this much and sleep at night? Then I'd remember her face when she said, "Pay up," and I'd understand. Some people don't lose sleep over cruelty. They lose sleep over losing control. Renee prepared the final hearing like it was a blueprint. She built a timeline of transfers, debts, deposits, and retainer payments. She highlighted the exact period where Imani's behavior shifted from marriage problems to divorce planning. She found the lease. She found the furniture invoices. She pulled credit reports showing new accounts. She included screenshots of Imani's messages demanding money and referencing the prenup as a threat. Renee looked at me and said, "You're going to want to speak from pain. Don't. Speak from facts. Let pain sit in the background. Facts do the work." I started taking care of myself because I realized survival wasn't automatic. I ran early in the morning. I ate real food again. I stopped drinking to numb the nights. I wrote down what happened, not to create drama, but to keep myself sane. When you're being gaslit, written facts become a lifeline. I also started therapy privately, not to become a new person for an audience, but because I didn't want this experience to turn me into someone bitter and reckless. I wanted to stay myself without being wounded. The day of court, I wore a simple suit, clean, quiet, not performative. Imani walked in looking flawless, like she was attending a corporate meeting. Patrice sat behind her. Sean hovered in the hallway and smirked, whispering, "It's over." I didn't respond. I reminded myself that my dignity wasn't a debate. In the courtroom, Imani testified first. She spoke smoothly about feeling controlled, about needing protection, about me being emotionally absent. She described herself as someone who sacrificed. She didn't mention the transfers unless asked. When asked, she called them self-preservation. Renee cross-examined with patience. She let Imani build her story tall. Then she asked, "Ms. Coleman, do you recall signing a prenuptial agreement prior to marriage?" Imani said yes. Renee asked, "Do you recall the section regarding dissipation of marital assets in contemplation of divorce?" Imani glanced toward her attorney. "Not the exact wording," she said. Renee nodded and read the line slowly so the room could hear it clearly. In the event either party removes marital funds or incurs marital debt in contemplation of divorce, the withdrawing party forfeits any claim to spousal support and any interest in the marital residence, and shall reimburse the marital estate in full. The silence that followed was heavy. Renee then introduced the exhibits one by one. Bank statements showing transfers into an account not disclosed to me, credit accounts opened and used, the lease signed before the ring moment, deposits paid with joint funds, furniture purchased, legal retainer paid for marital money. Renee didn't insult Imani. She didn't need to. She simply asked, "Ms. Coleman, were these transactions made before you filed?" Imani answered yes. "Were they made while marital funds were still shared?" "Yes." "Were they made as you prepared to end the marriage?" Imani's jaw tightened. "I did what I had to do," she said. Still no remorse. Just entitlement. Renee introduced the message where Imani texted me after taking the ring. "You should have known better. Pay up." The judge looked at it and asked, "Is this your message?" Imani said, "Yes." The judge asked, "What did you mean by pay up?" Imani lifted her chin. "He owed me," she said like it was obvious. "I'm not leaving with less than I deserve." She didn't apologize. She didn't soften. She didn't pretend it was emotion. She said it like a policy. When I testified, I kept my voice steady and my words simple. I spoke about supporting her through school, paying bills, trying to communicate, trying therapy, trying to keep peace. I described the ring moment without exaggeration. I described being served at work, the fear of rumors, the motel nights, the quiet panic in my chest when I realized my reputation could be destroyed by someone's story. Renee asked if I ever threatened Imani. I said no. Asked if I ever laid hands on her. I said never. Imani stared at me with cold eyes, not even pretending to be hurt. The judge ruled without drama. He didn't give a speech. He didn't try to teach a lesson. He enforced the document Imani had waved like a weapon. The clause applied. The transfers and debts qualified as dissipation in contemplation of divorce. Imani forfeited claims to spousal support as outlined by the prenup. Her claim to the residence shifted under the agreement's terms. She was ordered to reimburse the marital estate for funds removed and assume responsibility for debts she incurred under that planning. The judge's tone was plain, almost bored, because to the court, this wasn't a tragedy, it was math. Imani's face held for a few seconds, then tightened into fury. Patrice's mouth turned hard. Not one of them looked at me with regret. Not one of them even attempted a human moment. Outside the courtroom, Imani stepped close and said, "This isn't over." Her voice was low and controlled. Patrice stared like she wanted to memorize my face for hatred. I walked away with Renee, my hands still shaking slightly, not from fear of them, but from the release of months of pressure. When you're drowning quietly for a long time, even standing in shallow water feels unreal. Karma didn't arrive like thunder. It arrived like deadlines, court orders, interest, the slow consequence of a person's own choices. Imani tried to stall reimbursements. She filed to challenge pieces of the ruling. She argued over numbers. She accused Renee of tricking her, as if reading a clause was deception. The court didn't care about her anger. The court cared about compliance. Her legal fees climbed. Her credit tightened. The apartment she had secured with joint funds became another bill attached to her name. Victor Langston didn't rescue her the way she expected. Men with status often prefer clean situations. No court orders, no reimbursement plans, no debts. Imani's life became administratively heavy, and Victor's attention drifted. When I heard through Malik that Victor moved on, I didn't feel joy. I felt confirmation. People who treat love like an upgrade often get discarded the same way. Imani still didn't admit wrongdoing. She simply blamed the world for not giving her the ending she wanted. Patrice and Tasha blamed me too. Patrice told people I used legal tricks. Tasha posted captions about narcissists and men who punish women for choosing themselves, without ever mentioning the transfers, the debts, the planning. Sean told a mutual friend I was petty. Petty, because I didn't fund my own erasure. I realized then that their loyalty to Imani wasn't about truth, it was about identity. They needed her to be right, because if she wasn't right, then they had to admit they participated in cruelty for entertainment. My transformation happened quietly because I didn't trust public attention anymore. I changed my routines. I kept my circle small. I focused on work and took a higher role overseeing multiple sites. More responsibility, more pay, less exposure to petty rumors, because performance speaks louder than gossip when it's consistent. I kept my finances clean and separated. I built savings like a man who understood that stability isn't just comfort, it's protection. I didn't announce anything. I didn't post wins. I learned that privacy is a kind of peace no one can steal. Therapy helped me name what happened without turning it into a personality. My therapist didn't tell me to forgive and forget, like forgiveness was a shortcut. He helped me accept that I could be a good man and still be mistreated. He helped me see how my fear of being labeled angry had kept me quieter than I should have been. He helped me learn boundaries that didn't require yelling, boundaries that were simply decisions. I stopped answering calls that made me feel small. I stopped explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding. The divorce finalized in paperwork and silence. I signed, I moved forward, and I refused to keep emotional ties alive through arguments. Imani never offered closure. She never admitted harm. She never said, "I'm sorry." She continued to speak as if she was the injured one. I stopped hoping for her humanity because hope, in that situation, was just another chain. The day it was finalized, I went home, cooked a simple meal, and sat in my quiet apartment realizing something strange. Grief and relief can sit in the same body at the same time. A year after the ring moment, I bought a modest home in Fort Mill, South Carolina, close enough to Charlotte for work, far enough to feel like a fresh chapter. I bought it under my name only. I painted the walls myself on weekends with music low and windows open. I bought furniture slowly and intentionally. Every item felt like a choice I made for myself, not a compromise, not a performance. Peace felt unfamiliar at first, like silence after a long alarm. Then it started feeling like mine. I heard Imani had to move again, downsizing, shifting, losing stability. She blamed the judge, blamed lawyers, blamed me, blamed men, blamed anyone but herself. Patrice complained about ungrateful husbands. Tasha kept posting about healing, like captions could erase consequences. Sean moved on to different circles, looking for another situation to exploit. None of them showed remorse at any point. They simply adjusted their narrative to fit the new reality, that their plan didn't work the way they expected. The last time I saw Imani was in a grocery store parking lot in Charlotte. I was loading bags into my trunk, dressed plain, nothing that signaled success. She walked out with a tight posture, face done, eyes sharp. She looked at me for a second like she was deciding whether to speak. Then she looked away like I was air and kept walking. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a cold refusal to be human. I watched her drive off and felt something settle in me. Not rage, not sadness, release. The comeback wasn't loud. It wasn't a public humiliation. It wasn't me standing up at a family dinner with receipts and a speech. It was the court enforcing a line she ignored, and it was me rebuilding a life she couldn't touch. I learned to stop negotiating my worth with people who treat kindness like weakness. I learned that being calm doesn't mean being available for harm. I learned that the best revenge for a person who enjoys your suffering is for them to never have access to you again. She took my ring off and said, "Pay up," certain she could extract my life like a fee. But one line in the prenup hit like a brick, and everything she planned, everything she counted on, collapsed into consequences she couldn't talk her way out of. My success stayed private on purpose. Steady work, clean finances, a quiet home, and a mind that could finally rest. That was the real ending. Not victory in the spotlight, just peace that didn't require permission. If you made it to the part where the judge read that clause out loud, you already know this wasn't about revenge. It was about quiet consequences. If you want more real, grounded stories where the victim stays calm, moves smart, and wins without begging or performing, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Next story is even colder, because this time the cheater thought she could claim alimony forever until the term she agreed to turned into a trap. The end.